Welcome, Dr. Epic here. What we're going to talk about in this section is death at Christmas time, wife givers, wife takers, love and marriage, growing opium, and the damn war. We're going to talk about Claude LeviStrauss and his ideas of alliance theory as they apply to a group of people from Southeast Asia called the Kachin. That is a Kachin bride and groom right there, and on the far left, that is a very youthful Claude LeviStrauss. Right up above me is the outline for the information that's about to follow. Then you should put that in your notes so you can organize what we're going to talk about. Because what we're going to talk about is that question right up above my head. Why are the cultures of the world different, and how have the present differences developed? The question created by Franz Boas at the dawn of the 20th century. Now, according to Malinowski, if you want to answer that question, why are the cultures of the world different, you should look at how the different cultural structures function within the context of the people who use them. You should look at these cultural structures, things like traditions, institutions, practices, and what role they play in a culture's practices. Even something as odd as slicing your face plays a role in the culture you study. We've already looked at Edward Evans Pritchard, and now we're going to look at Claude LeviStrauss. Now, Claude LeviStrauss was probably the pinnacle of anthropological thought in an era that's known as the golden age of anthropology. Claude LeviStrauss, and those dates are quite real, by the way, born 1908, passed from this earth 2009. Dude was 101 years old and wrote, like, up until the day he died, he wrote books. Claude LeviStrauss is considered by any measure to be one of the greatest minds to ever inhabit cultural anthropology, and indeed social science in general. Claude LeviStrauss was a brilliant person, and probably the person that came the closest to building an answer to the question posed by Franz Boas. His work is incredible. His work is voluminous. It spanned, he had an active academic career for 60 years. He wrote over 20 major books and probably about 40 minor ones. He's an absolutely brilliant mind, an absolutely brilliant thinker, and one of the greatest minds in anthropology, period, was Claude LeviStrauss. However, one of the problems with Claude LeviStrauss is the dude wrote so much. He died when he was 101. He wrote so much that it's very hard to sort of be introduced to the works of Claude LeviStrauss. Like most academics, they'll fill up their works will fill up a bookshelf. LeviStrauss will fill up a small library. The dude was completely prolific, and this has had the unfortunate side effect that his work is so big, a lot of people just get really frustrated and give up before they really start cracking it. And his books are just absolutely incredible, dealing not just with social organization, which is what we're going to talk about here, but dealing with, life growing up in the 30s and 40s. He's French, growing up in 1930s and 1940s France, the structure of human thought, these dichotomies of culture, why certain symbols are used and why they're chosen. And here's just some of my favorite books by Claude LeviStrauss: Structural Anthropology, The Savage Mind, The Raw and the Cooked, Myth and Meaning, The Way of the Masks. Probably if you get interested in Claude LeviStrauss, and I would really urge you to do so, probably the introductory text would be Tristes Tropiques, which is the book right above my head. That is really a good autobiographical study of why Claude LeviStrauss is getting into anthropology and what he wants to study and running away. He had to escape from Nazi-occupied France in the 1940s because, he's Jewish. And, Claude LeviStrauss's books are just absolutely incredible. You read something like Structural Anthropology or The Raw and the Cooked, and I took pretty much almost a year out of my life and just almost did nothing but read Claude LeviStrauss. And his books are really kind of hard to read because every 20 minutes you want to set the book down and just walk back and forth across your living room because your mind has just been completely blown. A genius mind by any reckoning whatsoever. And one of the odder things about Claude Levi-Strauss, this absolute genius who was at the pinnacle of the golden age of anthropology, is that he had to flee. The Nazis conquered France, and Claude Levi-Strauss was Jewish. He was in France. He was French, so he had to escape the country. He had to spend several months on a boat because the United States quite shamefully rejected the passports of many of these Jewish refugees from Europe. And in fact, on that boat, in political limbo is when he wrote most of Tris Tropiques. But he's finally accepted into the United States. He gets into New York City in 1942, and he's this very young guy, and he gets invited to a dinner at the Department of Anthropology at Columbia University on December 21st, only 4 days before Christmas. And Ruth Benedict is there, and Robert Lowy is there, and there's youthful Claude Levi-Strauss is there at this very formal dinner party. And much to their surprise, there's a knock on the door, and they open the door, and it's the old man himself. Franz Boas shows up. In fact, it's very, very cold. And Franz Boas is actually wearing one of his old Eskimo anoraks back in his days of studying on Baffin Island. And he wasn't expected to come, but Franz Boas sits down, and seated next to him at dinner is Claude Levi-Strauss. And Claude Levi-Strauss, this young, brilliant mind who's going to take cultural anthropology to unforeseen heights, and the man who more or less created anthropology, Franz Boas, fall into this deep conversation talking about culture and life and the structure of human thought. And the two men hit it off very, very well. And in the middle of the conversation, Franz Boas has a massive, massive heart attack and dies in the arms of Claude Levi-Strauss. So that's a true story that actually happened 4 days before Christmas, 1942. But Claude Levi-Strauss, there's a young Levi-Strauss, there's much older Claude Levi-Strauss. Really, if you take his entire body of work, if you take this incredible, massive body of work, and you sort of slice it down the middle, he basically worked on two main things for the duration of his life. One is what we're going to talk about here, sort of the structure of marriage agreements, something that he called alliance theory. That's what we're going to talk about. The other thing, which is actually a much more richer field of conversation, and it's a much more interesting topic, at least in my opinion, is the nature and structure of human thought itself. And what he did is he argued that the structures of myth and legend and narrative reveal these deeper truths about the structure of human thought. And Levi-Strauss sought to explain why certain symbols and totems are used in similar ways in very dissimilar societies. And this was done through an analysis of binary oppositions. That basically he argued that human thought itself is binary. It thinks in terms of pluses and minuses, and it creates these binary oppositions in all of its symbols. If there is a sky, then there is the earth. If the sky is masculine, the earth must be feminine. One is raw, one is cooked. And all of human thought is built around binary oppositions. And all of human thought leads up to the ultimate binary opposition of nature versus culture. And all of structural anthropology is built around these concepts of binary oppositions and structure. And this is the deep structure of human thought, which is revealed in our discussion of legends and myths and symbols. And all of that is incredibly interesting. And that is the last of it I'm going to talk about right now, because we're going to talk about alliance theory, because I want to talk about how culture structures function in the context of the people who use them. We're going to talk about alliance theory, and we're going to talk about alliance theory in terms of your old friend and mine, Thomas Hobbes. Do you remember the 2 points of Thomas Hobbes' argument? Well, you should, because I'm not going to recover them here, but keep them in mind as we talk about alliance theory and the Kachin. And does alliance theory and do the cultural practices of the Kachin, do they refute Thomas Hobbes? Do they support Thomas Hobbes? Or do they force a modification of the philosophies of Thomas Hobbes? So first, let's talk about what exactly alliance theory is. Alliance theory basically consists of two parts. It exists to further the interest of one's lineage group and to avoid the incest taboo by always marrying outside of your own lineage. And in alliance theory, either one's marriage partner is specifically delineated through custom and tradition, or it simply involves anyone who is not specifically a member of one's own group. In fact, Claude LeviStrauss crafted this in terms of binary oppositions. You have in-group and then not in-group. And it follows the pattern of cross-cultural marriage alliance, which is right up above my head. And I'm going to describe that in just a tick. Basically, alliance theory argues that instead of building allied relations between high-status men, which is what the Kula ring does, or measuring consanguinity, blood relatedness, which is what the segmentary lineage system does, there is another mode of socio-political organization based around affinity. Affinity is kinship through marriage or adoption. It is not blood relationship. Blood relations are consanguinity. And it follows the little chart right up above my head, which is to say that all people are divided in two groups. You have wife givers, and then you have wife takers. Alliance theory has small groups promoting codependence through a series and a tradition of marriage alliances. And this is what Claude LeviStrauss explained in the first of his major revolutionary works, The Elementary Structures of Kinship. Again, this is pure Malinowski talking about structures and institutions. This is all very Bronislaw Malinowski. But according to Levi-Strauss, what promotes peace and cooperation between different groups and also avoids the incest taboo are units bound together through the bonds between married women. Affinal relationships are just as critical, if not more important, than consanguineous ones. And I want you to look at this little colored chart right up above my head. This is one type of alliance theory called cross-cousin marriage alliance, in which you have four different lineages. And each lineage is a wife giver to one group, but a wife taker from another group. So you have lineage A, that's the red lineage. Lineage A is a wife giver to lineage B. Lineage B is a wife giver to lineage C. Lineage C is a wife giver to lineage D. But they are all, because all of them are giving wives to the other group, they're all taking them from another. So lineage A is a wife taker from lineage D. Lineage B are wife takers from lineage A. Lineage C is a wife taker from lineage B. So if you are a young woman in, say, lineage A, your marriage is to some extent predetermined. Now, your parents might not necessarily tell you which man you're going to marry, but the tradition is your marriage partner must come from lineage B. And your mother, by the way, has to come from lineage D. What binds all four lineage groups together, what binds the alliance together, are affinal relationships, relationships between married women. And an example of alliance theory in practice can be found among the Kachin people. And I want to point this out. Claude Levi-Strauss did not specifically work among the Kachin people. What I'm doing is just using the Kachin people as an example of Levi-Strauss's ideas about alliance theory. Okay, so who are the Kachin? The Kachin, if you look right up above my head, they live in that part of the country of Myanmar, which is also used to be called Burma. The Kachin, and that's the Kachin right there. The Kachin are an ethnically distinct group straddling the high mountains along the border region between China and Myanmar or Burma. With a few of them are in India. Like the Nuer, the Kachin have been a remarkably successful people, and this success has attracted a lot of anthropological interest. And anthropologists have been really interested in their stubborn resistance. And roughly there's about, way up in these mountains, there's roughly about 1 to 1.5 million Kachin living way up in these mountains and highlands of the eastern Himalayas. They live in these scattered villages, that's what a Kachin village looks like at the bottom, subsisting off of herding and hillside rice terracing. It's very difficult terrain to get into or out of. And frankly, the Kachin seem to prefer it that way. They're a very distinct group. They're a notoriously stubborn group. They don't like being told what to do. They don't like telling other people what to do. They are a very fierce people. They speak their own distinct language, which is called Jingpo, which is actually a Tibeto-Burman language. So they don't speak Chinese at all. And in fact, I argued that the Nuer are kind of like the Texans of Africa, or maybe the Texans are the Nuer of America. Anyway, if the Nuer are kind of like the Texans of Africa, you can think of the Kachin kind of like the Scots of East Asia. They live up in the mountains. They're very distinct. They don't want anybody messing with them, and they don't want anybody telling them what to do. They just want to live up in their mountains and be Kachin. Now, the Kachin themselves, Kachin groom and bride. I told you we'd talk about love and marriage. They go together like a horse and carriage. Kachin consists of 5 large clans living in a series of asymmetrical marriage relationships. Some groups are wife givers and other groups are wife takers. Now, the 5 clans organized there on the upper left, as I can badly pronounce their names, are the Maran, the Marip, the Nikum, the Lathong, and the Lapi. Each clan provides wives to 2 other clans. Each group is a wife giver to 2 groups. For instance, Lathong, the Lathong clan, is a wife giver to the Marip and the Nikum clans. So it's asymmetrical and relationships are asymmetrical because the wife-giving clan will always socially outrank the wife-taking clan. The wife-givers, which are called the Mayu, ritually outrank wife-takers, the Dama. Hence, in any sort of situation, if you have a group of Lathong and a group of Marip or Nikum, the Lathong will always socially outrank the people who receive brides from them. And in this circumstance, in any Kachin married couple, note, the wife always socially outranks her husband. And here is in the chart right up above me. I'm not, that wasn't a premeditated pattern, by the way. I'm not trying to do anything hinky. That's just the way that the system works, if you characterize it in that manner. That each group is a wife giver to 2 other groups. All right, and this is, if you map out all these relationships, you get the chart that's right up above my head. Hence, a man will marry his wife from one clan, but marry off his sisters and daughters to a 3rd or 4th clan. A woman might be from the Lapi clan. She might marry into the Lathong clan, but her daughters will then marry into the Marip or Nikum clans. So she will be connected by marriage to almost every other clan within the Kachin people. And if she has granddaughters, they might marry the Maran or back to the Lapi. What connects the entire ethnicity, all million and a half of these individuals, are the connections between married women. Now, for any major decision, a man must consult his wife because his wife socially outranks him because she's from the wife givers and he belongs to the wife takers. And he not only must consult his wife, he has to consult his wife's brothers because, again, because they are from the wife-giving group, they socially outrank him, his sister's brothers, and his own family. So all 5 clans eventually get involved in any major decision. So you have this sort of roughshod democracy based on the relationship between wife givers, wife takers, based on the relationship between affinal ties, between married women. The entire political structure of the Kachin centers on affinal relations manifested through the bonds of marriage. It is a democracy based on the marriages between individuals. Again, the Kachin don't have a king, they don't have a president, they don't have elections, they have no government of any kind, yet they are a very, very successful group. There is a young Kachin woman preparing for marriage. So you have all 5 clans, and they act as both wife givers and wife takers in this kind of network of alliances, this network of marriage alliances that both provides for mutual dependence and clan equality. If one of these clans, for instance, the Moran, if they have a major problem with, say, drought or flooding, or they lose most of their crops, they can rely on the other clans to support them because they're all related. You know, if you're a Moran family and you've lost everything, you know, the wife, she comes from the Marip. You can go to the Marip for help. Your daughters will go to the Nikum clan, and they are going to come help you out because you outrank them. All right? So you have this system of mutual dependence and defense based on the relationship between married women. No clan can ever outrank any other because eventually everyone is wife giver to someone else. And every Kachin is more or less related to every other Kachin. What promotes peace, cooperation, and mutual defense among the Kachin is the connection between married women. Married women tie the entire ethnicity together. And it kind of works as this very kind of slow, rough democracy. The Kachin have traditionally made decisions that rapidly spread through the whole system of marriage alliance. Now, they are quite slow to make these decisions, and they can kind of think about a really big decision for decades before they pull the trigger on it. But once they make up their mind, this decision ripples outward among all 5 clans, and the decision is implemented like that. They are very slow to make decisions, but when they do make decisions, they make them as a single body. For instance, in the end of the 19th century, they were visited by Baptist missionaries. And they debated this Christianity thing for about 50 years until eventually they arrived at the general idea, we're going to abandon our traditional Buddhism and become the largest group of Baptists in Asia. And they did. Virtually the entire million group converted to the Kachin Baptist Church right around the year 1900. So you have these large-scale decisions percolate through the entire clan system through the connection between married women. And it's all done in the complete absence of any other governing institution. As a matter of fact, you can read like tourists' blogs, and they're really quite surprising. They're like, we're going to this mysterious Asian country of Myanmar. And they're like, wow, this place is Asian. Let's go 10 more miles down the road. Oh my gosh, this place is so incredibly Asian. Let's go way up in the mountains. Let's talk to these Kachin people. And then they go, and it's a Baptist church. In fact, they're the largest group of Baptists in Asia. There they are, the Baptist church. The Kachin Baptist Church. And it's not just really big decisions like this. Even really small decisions have to be made collectively, like I want to terrace the side of this mountain. I want to start raising flowers for the international market. In fact, one of my students made this very adroit observation. I was giving this lecture to the class, and this one student, she kind of cocked her head and went, so basically their entire government consists of, I have to ask my wife. And that's absolutely correct. Their entire democracy is based on the phrase, that sounds like a good idea, but I have to ask my wife. Here's another example of these big collective decisions. In 1942, after a year of debate, there's the Japanese and the Americans and the British are just basically bombing the hell out of each other all over Asia and the Pacific. And they're approached by the British and the Americans to join the side because the Japanese were invading Burma. And basically, they thought about it for about a year. The British and the Americans came to him and said, you have to help us kick Imperial Japan out of this part of the world. And the Kachin turned to him and said, let me ask my wife. So basically, after a year of debate, the entire Kachin nation then sided with the Americans and the British to fight the Japanese occupation of Burma. And there they are, the Kachin heroes of World War II. The entire group came over. There wasn't dissenters. It wasn't a group that was split down the middle. It took them a year to make this decision. But once the decision was made and the married women all talked about it, they sided with the Allies. And they rapidly became these very renowned mountain and jungle fighters. And in fact, the Kachin were a major contributor to the final Japanese defeat in Indochina. it took them about 15 years of debate. They were thinking about this in the mid 1960s and 1970s, but by about 1970, the Kachin thought about it. They asked their wives, and they decided we're okay with large-scale cultivation of opium for the international drug trade. We're totally okay with that. And there's the Kachin growing opium in their mountain valleys. So basically, by the 1970s, the Kachin decided they are completely okay with large-scale poppy farming for the international drug market, the illegal drug market. And they became a significant worldwide producer of both opium and heroin. After all, they don't use it. And to them, it's just a cash crop that a bunch of Russian mobsters and Chinese mafia types show up and buy from them. They're okay with it. Poppy farming soon became the main cash crop in the Kachin region. And the Kachin themselves are responsible for somewhere between 5 and 10% of the world's production of opium and heroin. So here's your crazy fact for the day. Somewhere around 10% of the world's illegal opium is grown by devout Baptists. Now, from 1962 to 2011, Myanmar, which is, again, used to be called Burma, was ruled by a series of generals and was one of the most repressive governments on earth. And that's one of the generals right there. And that guy looks completely terrifying. Oh my God, he's so serious. I don't even want to make fun of him. I'm scared. Okay, anyway, so Myanmar is one of the most repressive governments on earth. However, the military dictators really just wanted to keep the peace. So they reached this kind of basic understanding with the Kachin. They said, okay, we're going to leave you guys alone up in your mountains growing poppy. And in return, you're not going to support any attempts to overthrow the military dictatorship. That the Kachin would be left alone with relative autonomy. And in return, they wouldn't challenge the rule of the generals. And that was the sort of relationship that was worked out between these military dictatorships and the Kachin themselves. However, this started to change in 2011. And basically, through international pressure, Myanmar turned from a repressive military dictatorship to a repressive nationalist, ethnically driven democracy. So they have this nominal democracy, but a lot of people say that the democracy is just a mask for the old, powerful military government. Who knows? At any rate, this democratic government was elected, although the military does remain very, very influential and outside of civilian control. The new president, and many people see him as just a facade for military rule, the new president announced a program of ethnic unity and economic development. He basically said, Myanmar is for the Myanmar people, for the Myanmar nationality. This country is for our people who speak Myanmar, and that's what this country is for. And this alarmed the Kachin, because the Kachin are ethnically different. They generally don't speak Myanmar, and they are not ethnically Burmese. So the new nationalist democratic government was intentionally alienating the Kachin people and upsetting this sort of autonomy that they had worked out back with the military governments back in the 60s and the 70s. And this came to a head with an issue over this huge dam, which was called the Mitsone Dam. Now, what happened with the Mitsone Dam, there's a picture of it being constructed right up above. Now, the dam was a Chinese idea. Now, the modern People's Republic of China is in great need of power. I don't mean like political power, I mean electric power. That China itself has grown so fast that their manufacturing has outstripped their ability to produce electricity. And that's one of the reasons that pollution is such a massive problem in China itself, is like something like half of their electricity is produced by these awful like coal burning power plants. So Chinese money looked at this valley of Mitsone in northern Myanmar and said this place would be a great place to put a hydroelectric power plant based on this huge dam. So the Chinese government gave a lot of money to Myanmar. The Myanmar agreed to build this dam. There's the dam they started to build. And the idea was that Chinese capital would fund the creation of this dam. The dam would generate hydroelectric power, which would then be sold very cheaply back to China. That was the idea. But the problem is the area that they wanted to build the dam in, that's in the Kachin area. And they didn't really ask the Kachin about it. After a lengthy debate, or about a year or two, the Kachin said, you guys want to build that dam here? Let me ask my wife. So after a year or two of thinking about it, the Kachin thought about it, and they're like, no, we don't want a dam. We don't want to lose the farmland. We don't want to lose the dam. We don't want this huge road that you're going to build right through the middle of the Kachin area. We don't like all these Chinese being here. No. But the problem was that by the time that the Kachin had come to this decision about the dam was already half built. The Chinese had already transferred the money. And the new government was like, look, we promised China this huge powerhouse to our north, political powerhouse. We already agreed to build this dam for the Chinese. And the Kachin were like, well, you're just going to have to change your plans because we don't want it. And the Myanmar government thought about it, and then decided to launch a series of military attacks on the Kachin. So in 2011, 2012, 2013, the Burmese military, the military of Myanmar, that's them right up above, launched a series of attacks across northern Myanmar, specifically targeting Kachin villages, burning Kachin churches, in an attempt, they had Chinese support the whole time, in an attempt to sort of intimidate the Kachin into accepting the construction of this huge hydroelectric power plant, this huge dam. The Kachin were not intimidated. The Kachin that's them on the lower left. They rapidly constructed an army. They were already tied into these international drug cartels and criminals, and they were making a lot of money off of opium. So basically, they were able to purchase uniforms, mercenary trainers, and large amounts of weapons from the Chinese mafia just across the border in the People's Republic. And they very rapidly built this very effective army, basically centered on their clan organizations, organized around Baptist churches, and launched a series of ambushes and attacks on the Myanmar military across northern Myanmar, and faced with this sort of level of resistance from the Kachin, the government of Myanmar caved on the dam. They agreed to cancel the dam. Actually, they agreed to temporarily suspend construction on the dam. But everybody knows what that means. That means they basically showed up and said, the Kachin are blasting convoys, they're blowing up roads, they're attacking army patrols, they're murdering mayors. No, the dam is done. The dam is done. And they kicked all these Chinese engineers out. And in the middle of modern Kachin, there is this half-completed dam there. Probably will never be finished. So yeah, the Kachin won in this sort of nasty, sharp little struggle with the Myanmar government, which doesn't like them, and now they don't especially like the government at all. And in fact, what the Kachin are debating right now is, should they press for full independence? Being the old agreement with the generals down in the old Myanmar generals, that old agreement is void. They attempted to intimidate us militarily, and it didn't work this time, but who knows if it's going to work next time. So what the Kachin are currently debating right now, they are being asked the question, do we want to press and try to get our own country? And the Kachin men are thinking about us, and the Kachin men say, let me ask my wife. Because the entire system, the entire clan structure is held together through affinal relationships between married women. Now, so here's the question. How does this cultural structure function to meet the needs of the Kachin? And Does this system of interlocked clans and the way that the alliance theory holds the entire group together in this relationship between wife givers and wife takers, does this refute, support, or modify the philosophies of Thomas Hobbes? How does it do this, and why does it do this? And then next we're going to move on to Amazonia and the tropical rainforest of South America to meet the Yanomamo and Napoleon Shannon. And I will see you there.